the idea of this first topic is to go through what's new in Business Central in the latest release. I'm going to focus on what I think is probably the most relevant for everyone today in the latest version. So Copilot came in last year, so it's 12 months on now, so it's matured a little bit. So it's a little bit more embedded in the product, so I'll show a little bit of that and try and find some sort of real world use. There's going to be a session later on this afternoon that explains how it's been used in organization, but I'll focus on just what's in Business Central with Copilot. The other really exciting one is new Power BI reports out of the box in Business Central. So little secret, Microsoft acquired another partner's app that built a whole suite of Power BI, and they bought that IP and has put it into the standard product. So now everyone gets that. So really good time to start with Power BI. Right now it's sort of early days where you're a bit limited where you can't change anything, but in maybe next year you'll be able to get that source and make changes. So right now it's just good to explore and have a look, and then maybe next version. And then some other new reporting options with Excel and analysis reports around fixed assets, which will be useful. And new searching, so there's a new modern search option, which will show how that works and talk through that. And a few other little things around bulk attachments, resizing columns. And then I'll briefly talk also about user groups. So those who've been using BC for a few years may have had user groups as a way to set up users. That's being removed. There's a transition option that will happen automatically. I'll talk through a few of those options. So let's get into a bit of a demo. Okay, so Copilot, still a lot of features in preview. Now, one new option coming soon, right now not quite available in our version, just in the US version, sort of using them as guinea pigs. And you'll see it's still in preview. So you'll see the word preview around a few of the features that are out there. So this has been out for a year. The planning to come soon into our Australian version, but when it does come, it'll be quite useful. So mainly for helping, using this Copilot chat to use in natural language to just find records, provide some guidance, how do I do this? And a lot of these Copilot things that I'll show, you'll see this option to view some prompts. So it gives you an idea of what to ask for. So, because it's quite immature, I suppose. You need to be quite accurate with your prompts to say, look up this. And so it gives you some ideas of the type of things you can do. So show me this, show me the last invoice, right? For this customer, maybe. So you could do that sort of thing, right? Show me the last invoice. And then it will just show you could say for what customer, you could type in an invoice number. You could ask, like, how do I do something? Does it have this? And at the moment, it's just looking at Business Central doc sites for all the help. It's looking at your data. And it couldn't find anything, so that's great. Still in preview. What can I hope? Explain this, find this. Right, go to whatever. So can be useful. Again, it's growing. But you can ask a question like, how do I do something? Because you might be browsing around because this panel will still stay here. You might want to look at doing something like prepayments. You'll see some options. You say, what is that? How do I do that? You can ask the question, how do I set up prepayments? And then it'll look for all the sources. It'll give a reference of where it's found that source, and then you can open that. So it ties into the Microsoft Docs, and then that's been improved and always updated a lot by Microsoft. So if I scroll up a bit, you'll see, how do I set it up? Okay, go here, go there, do this. And then it gives you the references that you can then just click through to see that full help topic, right? So that is one thing. There is an area called Copilot and AI capabilities. Some things have been there, like the bank rec was in preview. The ability to try and reconcile, that's now generally available. So I guess to fine tune that, help improve that. So I won't show that because we showed it last time, but the idea is that can help with some auto matching of what's on the bank statement and what's in your bank ledger. and help do that like a one-to-many match automatically, or many-to-many, and it'll apply logic. And so it's something to explore for sure. And they should all be active anyway by default. Maybe in your system you might need to activate if it's not on, and this is where you can do it. So the chat is what I just showed. Another, trying to find a useful sort of real world example. I suppose this is maybe on a sales order, quote, invoice. You can use suggestions to get started. So if I do a new invoice for a customer, and just go to School of Fine Art, you'll see the little Copilot icon, and you can click on that, and then there's an option to suggest lines from a file, which I'll show as well. And then it brings up the little window, and then again, you've got the little prompt guide to say what sort of things you can do. So you could say copy from a last invoice, copy from an order number, copy from the last posted invoice, and then it will find that, display those lines on the screen, and then you'll have a chance to make changes. All right, so that's the last one. Say, oh, we'll do the same, but this time we'll do 10, and then you can insert. So it's sort of like that copy document, but it's based at an item level. So I will point out this only works for item type lines, not GL account at this stage. Okay, so it's only going to work if you're using items. I guess for a real world sort of example, if let's say you had an email from someone, not in Notepad, but you get the idea, where they've asked for certain items in text that doesn't quite match how you set that up in your system, then you could maybe copy that email, copy that, and say you want to, not that one, suggest lines, and then just paste it in here and then generate. And that'll look through your item list and then try and find matches. All right, so if I just show that text, right, it was quite not so accurate. It just said Brazil beans. It's picked up that name. You notice I had Tijuana beans, but it's found Mexico because that's sort of somewhat close. And what you can also do is you can view the lines and the confidence, and then that gives you that confidence match if it's high, medium, low, and you can see also the search terms. So behind the scenes, Copilot's it knows if you type in bean, it's also looking for seed or similar words, right? And Tier1, obviously that's a medium match because it's not quite the same. So I guess that's just a taste, the type of things that might be quite useful to use. The other thing is you can suggest from a file. So you might get an email from someone and they've sent you a file, it has to be a CSV file, that has basic data, a column. This CSV had a column similar to that text. It just had the description, how many I want, and then the unit of measure. All right, so I'll show it to you so it makes a bit more sense. Okay. All right, so it's just someone sent a list, just the description, quantity, and I did unit of measure too, because in this case, chairs, you can be in each, pizzas, boxes. So it said what I want, and I want to set, so it knows based on that it was a set. So if you've got a file, more a one-off thing, I guess, you can upload that. If that customer sends you this file, you don't necessarily have to build some sort of custom upload. You could try and just use this importing. So again, just on items, but just wanted to demonstrate that functionality. Okay. And you can always go back. You can click on the top, and then you can also see the mapping in that file, and you can actually configure that a bit more. So that's just found that based on having some basic column names. So it knows what to find, right? Okay. And the other thing I wanted to mention, you can, if you want to go full sort of Copilot accessibility, You could also do the Windows H key, and you get the microphone, and then you could use this to just talk. Say, I want 5 black chairs. All right, and then that'll put it in. There you go. So that's really more for the chat. Like using Siri on your phone, which I like to do because it's hard to type. Maybe on the PC, it's probably just quicker to type, but I find that useful when you're being lazy and you can't type. Windows H, look into that. It's very handy. Okay, that's enough for Copilot. Let's get back to, I had a couple of slides to go back into. Okay. So as I was saying before, there's new suite of Power BI reports. 7 apps. So in the marketplace in Power BI, you can just search the apps and you'll see Business Central Finance, Business Central Sales, Business Central Purchases. And then you can load that and then map that into your system, which is really, really easy. And you have access to use those inside BC. And inside those 7 apps, there's over 70 reports. Okay, what I'll mention is you need to have a Power BI Pro license at least to be able to use that. And it's just like, it's because it's in sort of preview, you can just use it to sort of, you can't modify it at the moment, but in the next version, open source will be released. Okay, so I'll show that quickly. So we're seeing it for real. Okay, so on the Role Center, once you're on the latest version, now I think it'll need to be 25.1, you will see Excel reports that came in a couple of versions ago. There's a whole suite of new ones in, by the way, too. So the new Excel versions of reports, because most reports, I guess they're getting away from the report that fits on the page to print out. It's more for analysis now that everyone wants it in Excel anyway. So it's running these reports now. They've refreshed a few of the standard reports, so you can still run some. You might notice a few, trial balance, age receivable reports that have been tidied up a little bit, maybe made landscape to fit in a bit more. But a lot of these you can just run to choose your options as normal. But instead of saying print, you would say download. It downloads the Excel file. Right. Now you've got Power BI. So the new part is this, Power BI reports. And you'll have a whole list in there. There's a lot more available. And you can browse and search to find it. So if we run one like the finance report, this particular one has got like a tab for each of the other reports in there. So some of the others will be just a specific report. This one's just got some sample data at the moment. So you can view it inside BC like this, but you could also just go to Power BI and open that to get the full experience. All right. So these are just by default, this is just sample data, but you can click through. I don't know if you can see that, it's a bit tiny, isn't it? But you can click through, if like those are familiar with Power BI, you can drill through on some numbers. You can right click and drill through, and then that'll take you to another sheet that has maybe the transaction. So you can drill into that. At this stage, it's just this data, you can't go any further, but there was talk of maybe in a future version, you could click and then that would have the URL built in to take you to the BC ledger entry. So you'd be able to open the page in BC. That's where they're heading, right? So if there's a report not mapped in, when you first run it, you'll get a wizard like this, and you can step through, do some configuration with your dates, where to start to capture the data from, your working week, and then this is the part where you need to map it in to your Business Central app. So you'd have to go to Power BI first, download the app into a team or a channel, and then you can choose which one it is, and it'll be called something like this, Business Central Reports. And then you can step through the screens and then it'll be available. Okay. So definitely worth looking at. A good time to start. I'll just move on quick. You could spend a whole session on BI, but There's a lot to cover. Only version 25. 25.1, in fact, which will be like a monthly update. So by the time most of you up, Jonathan's going to talk about the update process at the end. He'll give some dates, but yeah. Okay. Other little things, there's new out-of-the-box templates for financial reporting. So this previously account schedules, it was renamed financial reporting. You didn't get much to start with before, but now they've added in 12 out-of-the-box column layouts, definitions, and rows, 5 new row reports, and some predefined reports. So what that means is on our list under financial reporting, you'll see new reports. By default, they'll be loaded in there. All right. So the system has built some of these reports. All right. So before there was nothing in there. You get some samples to get started now. So the row definition, you'll need some configuration for these, but the most benefit is the column definitions because they can be quite technical and there's a lot of work in there. So just comparing this year to last year, month to date, year to date, that sort of thing. So some of that hard work has been done already. So if you're not using this, then just in the new version, have a look in financial reporting and have a play, and it'll be a bit easier for yourself to get up and running without needing much support. But okay, and then the other, I guess, analysis there's an ad hoc analysis option for fixed assets now. So previous version, there was a analyze option. Hopefully everyone's found that and is using that, but I'll touch on that if you haven't. There is ad hoc analysis in fixed assets now. So that's technically a bit difficult because there's multiple tables to look at. Analyze mode is just doing the one page. So now they've built that in, and I'll show that. And then I highlighted this before, the new Excel reports. All right, so just quickly show you the button I'm talking about. So the standard analyze option that's always been there is this little button that you can enter analysis mode, and that just changes the page you're on into like a pivot table type option in Excel that you can just choose what columns and drag them and change the grouping. So that's always been there. Last version, it was changed to this little button, so really useful on one table. But under the fixed asset report area, you've got this analyze fixed assets option. And then you can go and change your grouping, maybe group by posting group. And then you'll have a column for the different types, and then you can get a book value this way. Okay. And then there's also some other Excel reporting in there. So those, maybe, quarter of the room interested in fixed asset reporting. Under the report option, you'll see analyze, and then you'll see these new Excel options soon as well. So the book value report that most people would run, there's now an Excel version of that. It's nice and tidy that you can run to Excel. Okay. Very good. Okay. Moving on to the next topic, modern search. So this is good. So there's a new search. It's called the modern search. So normally if you want to find something, you would click in the search and type in a term. Like, I want to find this London share, you type in London, and it just finds any part of that. Now, you'll see now this little icon, it'll explain what it's searching on. And the old current search is it searches every column in there. So it can take some time, but can be flexible. There's a little drop down here where you can switch it to use modern search. And as it suggests, it is faster. Just to highlight that. So when I'm searching here, you'll see it's only searching the key columns that most people want to search. So it's not searching the other stuff, so that makes it faster. But it's also a bit smarter in the way it searches. So if I was in your old legacy one, if I said I want a London chair, it wouldn't find anything because it's not exactly called London chair. But if you use the modern search, it'll allow you to do a search like that. And it'll search for, I want a London like blue chair, and you could do that and it would pick up anywhere in the name. So maybe really useful to find when you're not quite sure exactly the description. But even just the fact that it's going to be a lot faster. So if you've got lots of data, and there's a few big databases out there, definitely worth switching to the modern search. Okay. I don't know. I think you'd have to switch it, and it seems to remember just on that page, because you might like to not use that search on some pages. So I think the first time when you change it, it will remember that. It just on that. Yeah, so it only searches the page we're on, right? But I was going to show later, which I'll do anyway now, is another type of search. You've got this search at the top, which is that Alt Q search, which you use normally to find menus and things, but it actually searches the whole database. So if you've got like an invoice number or a customer, you know, we got Mark is in there. When you click on it, it'll find things like marketing and other things. But if you scroll down, there's search company data. And then that brings up this search, and it'll search based on the profile. It will have certain tables it's looking at. So it picks Mark's name up because there's been a few invoices to Mark, right? So even like an invoice number or some sort of reference number, it will pick anything like that. And now I think this has been improved to be a bit faster as well with the search. So give it a shot, depending on your database size. Might take some time because it's searching everywhere. But you can see there's an option here to set up where to search. So by default on your role, so business manager, you want to see a lot of stuff. It's searching a lot of areas. If you have like a sales order type role, it's only looking at your sales related data. So you can go and configure that though. You can click in to these tables and pick what fields to look at as well in the search. So you could narrow it down just to certain ones. So yeah, modern search. All right. Now let's switch back to slides for a sec. Okay, gotta press on. User groups. So if you're using user groups, now we've had a few calls with different clients to talk through this, but basically in the next version, this was removed the last version if you started new, but if you already were using it, it could continue on. But next version 25, it'll disappear. You won't see user groups anymore. And there's like a migration guide. So we would recommend reviewing it now to work out which way you want to go. And what you'll see is if you go into the user groups section, you'll see a little banner that it says it's going to be removed in the next version. And to sort of start this process, you can do this feature management function and then enable this option called convert user group permissions. And then basically there's two options, and then the default option. So if you take no action, what it's going to do is it's just going to take all the permissions that are on the group and assign it to that user individually. So when you upgrade, nothing's going to break. It's not related to this anyway. And it'll transfer the permissions that were in the group, put them individually on the user, which is the first option. Assign the permissions to the members. In the guide, it says that is recommended in most cases. But the other option is convert it to a permission set. So it'll take your group. Let's say you've got a group for team members, like purchasing users. And inside that group, there's lots of permissions. So you don't want to have like 10 permissions on the user. It's a bit harder to manage. So with the second option, convert to a permission set, that will take that group and create a permission set called team member. And then inside that permission set will be sort of the hierarchy of the other permission sets in there. So that's one thing to consider. I think in general, it's just a good time to maybe review and do a bit of a tidy up of the current setup, because this is sometimes maybe it's set up pretty simply to get going, and then maybe down the track, it's a good time to review, what access everyone has, and especially after audit, we tend to get a few questions about what access does everyone have to everything. So it's a good time to review this and then maybe use the new permission set method of doing exclusions. So you can say you can do all this, but you can't get into bank accounts, or you can't change the user setup, that sort of thing. So we can help talk through that, but also just to point out that there is an option that came in last version called security groups. The idea is that ties into the Microsoft Entra ID. So that's an IT thing where you onboard someone and they put them in a security group. So they normally assign a license, put them in a group to say they're in the finance team. Well, we can link that finance team group to a BC permission set. So it's depending on the user. I think if you've got a lot of team members maybe that change a lot, it can help that streamline that onboarding to have a security group that IT can just put them in that group, and then they get the default sort of base permissions at least. So it's good for just doing the basics, and then once they're in BC, then you can do the normal process of adding the extra for access and put them in the approval setup, because you still need to do some onboarding to say who approves who and that sort of thing. So, but yeah, you can get in touch with us if you'd like a session to go through that in more detail if you know you're using that feature. Okay. All right. Other minor things, there's a new document attachments area. So before it was maybe a little bit painful. You got to click on the document and then attach in a few clicks. Now it appears as another little section called documents, and you can just say upload files, and you can just drag into that, and you can do multiple now. Before you could just had attach, and you're going to do single files. If you need to do multiple supporting attachments, you can just drag both in. But just if you're anyone using Continia document capture will see a similar screen already. So now there'll be two documents. One will be under details, and that's the Continia ones. But under the attachment section, that's the standard Microsoft one. So just to confuse. And incoming documents, if you're using that method, then there's a new option that says upload supporting attachments as well. So you do the main attachment, which would normally be the invoice, and then supporting document. You can clearly choose that this is a supporting document. Okay. And then a couple of other little things. You can resize the column width in any list, which I'll quickly show that. And then there's some improvements around the job queue. So you'll get a message when you first log in, a little banner to say this job queue failed. And that's a setting per user. So you can go to My Notifications and turn that off if you don't want it. By default, it'll be on. Okay. And then in the job queue, there's an option to set priorities now. So if you've got lots of job queues running, you can set the priority to say some are high and some are low. If they're at the similar timing, it'll prioritize. Okay. So I'll show that this is a really simple thing, but it can be really irritating. So we know the columns, you can normally just change columns by expanding that like this. And you could do that on a lot of list pages like this. But now you can do it everywhere. Some places you couldn't. The main place you couldn't before was like a drop-down list like this. If you're looking at items, some of these were sort of locked and you couldn't, but now you can just expand them easily. So really small thing, but really useful. You probably would have just stumbled across that, but yeah, but you can take that back to any of the key users and say, this is what we found out, and they'll love that, I'm sure. Okay. Recap, couple of did you know useful tips now. There's an access key option. If you probably maybe stumbled across this without knowing, but if you hit the Alt key, you get little shortcuts come up. So that's a quick way. If you want to do a sale, you want to get into the sales menu, you could do JS, and then you want to create an invoice, it's A. So a user, you can just go, if you want to use a keyboard, you can just remember these shortcuts and navigate around really fast. All right, really useful. Yeah, the search in company data, which I showed earlier. A key, just a useful thing to remember, you can personalize the pages and also the buttons on there. So I know one example that I always like to do is dimensions. dimension values. So you normally have to click down and click on that, but you can just drag this option and you can move that and right at the top. So you can put it where you get the red sort of bar, you can drop it, and now it's always just promoted. So it just saves a click. So, you know, minor, but you do that 50 times, 50 clicks, you know, after efficiencies, yeah. The other thing to keep in mind is if you want to do some bulk changes, there is the edit in Excel option. I know some are using that already. I've got this integrated with OneDrive, so there is also a setup OneDrive integration, so it can open Excel online instead of going to your downloads each time. So you can consider if you want that. And then what this is it's a Dynamics app in Excel that connects through to Business Central. So you might need some IT help to load that if you're locked down and don't have that access. But basically, this will load that page, all the customers, and you can do some bulk changes. You can just change names here, and then hit publish. So you can scroll across, and pretty much every field will be there. So you can go. You want to change in bulk. You want to set reminders for everyone. You need to change some setup. So you can do this yourself in Excel. Even a new customer, user group customer, and you can just do the basics and publish. It will validate everything. So if it's not if it's got some validation on that field, then it won't accept that. But they just created a new customer record. So if I go back in here, refresh, we got a new one in there. So really good for bulk changes in data without necessarily needing the config packages. Okay. So that was going from here into edit in Excel. And there's a permission set specifically around giving access to this. So if anyone's like super, they can do it. But maybe if you're locked down, you don't even see that button, we have issues. So they consider the permissions as around it too. One minor thing, which actually came up yesterday on a call with someone. This is not from this version, but from different versions where they're saying whenever you change the document date on an invoice, it changes the posting date. That's because of this setting. That's both for sales and purchases. You can just turn that off because invoices haven't been approved in time. You might want to change one of the dates. So you might want to remove the link between the document date and posting date. Just turn that off. I want to highlight that because I know that's been asked a few times. Okay,